We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Durham Planning Commission retreat. And just for folks who are joining us as guests or who are watching online, this is not a typical Planning Commission meeting. We don't have any requests in front of us this evening that require a public hearing, or there are no decisions that are being made. The Planning Commission has just met periodically to talk about big issues of concern, things that may not make it onto our regular agendas when we're looking at actual zoning or future land use map cases. These meetings have traditionally happened in person at City Hall. This is our first gathering since we've moved remotely. We had a lot of backlog. Thankfully, we've worked through a lot of the backlog. And today's meeting really is a chance for us to talk about the comprehensive plan and a few other issues that are in front of us. To start the meeting, I am told we do need to have a roll call vote. So Grace Smith will join us, I believe, here in a moment, and we'll have an official roll call vote, and then we can just move into our meeting agenda as planned.
Yes, good afternoon. This is just an attendance roll call, so just like we normally do. Commissioner Amendolia?
Here.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner Chair Busby?
Here.
Commissioner Cameron?
Here.
I can't read my own handwriting. I apologize. Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Present.
Vice Chair Kinchin?
Present.
Commissioner Landfried?
Present.
Commissioner Lowe is going to be absent. He requested an excused absence. He had a death in the family. Commissioner McIver?
Present.
Commissioner Miller?
Present.
Okay. Commissioner Morgan?
Good evening. Present.
Oh, great. And Commissioner Williams? Okay. Commissioner Williams may join late, so maybe we should save our excused absences until the very end. Is that okay, Chair Busby? Okay.
That works.
Okay.
Great. And for commissioners, first of all, thanks for making this work. I'm really glad we can do this. For those of you that have done these before, I think because we're meeting virtually, we are recording this. It'll be a little more formal than the gatherings that we've had previously. When we've met at City Hall, these meetings also, they're always publicly noticed since we are meeting as a governing body or as an appointed body, but this one will be just a little bit different. So we're gonna announce each item as we move into it, and we can use kind of the same protocols if people are open to it. If you want to raise your hand in Zoom, or you just want to raise your hand in the screen, but this is not the formal meeting where we need to recognize folks like we do at the normal meetings, just to get us started. We'll start with just the opening comments, and Armir and I mostly just wanted to let you all know that he and I met with the staff a couple weeks ago, and some of you had offered feedback about things you wanted to tee up on today's agenda. And so that's what we've got in front of us. This is stuff that Armir and I had heard from many of you, or we wanted to get to. So we suggested these to staff, and then the staff added an additional item or two for today. Now that we're doing this, I'm hopeful that, number one, I hope we get through everything today. And then second of all, I'm hoping that we can begin to do these on a more regular basis, even though we're still in the remote status. Today might feel a little lengthy because, again, we haven't done one of these since, I think, February or January, maybe even earlier than that. It's been a while. So I think we got a lot of stuff we're trying to tee up. But I'm looking forward to working with all of you today, and particularly to be able to spend a decent amount of time talking about the comprehensive plan and what comes next. With that, I wanted to invite Sarah Young, now the planning director, to join us for some opening remarks as well.
We had her, and then she went away. There she is again. You're muted.
I was trying to fix my awkward lighting situation because I felt a little jaundiced there for a minute. So
yeah, with me, it's awkward lighting too.
So thank you, Chair Busby. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you all in my new capacity as planning director and share with you a little bit about my philosophy and where we're headed as a department under my leadership, because obviously every planning director brings something different, a different focus to the department. For those of you that don't know much about me, I've been with the department 20 years. 20 years, actually I just had my anniversary about a month ago. And I've done a little bit of everything. Before I joined the department, I was in a private architecture practice. That's actually what my background is. So for years, I was kind of the black sheep of the planning department because I wasn't a planner. So I wanted to share just a little bit about where my priorities are. And I had a similar chat with the whole staff a few weeks ago, or about a month ago now. I want to start off with saying that while folks feel like we have a lot of different customers, I think there's a difference between a customer and where our priorities should be. And I want to explain that. As public servants, our first priority should be to serve the community. And those are the people that live here, that are here for the long haul. They're the people left behind with whatever developer or whatever we allow developers to build in the community. And so our priority as a department should be to serve the community. Developers may transact business with us, and we should make sure to be efficient and timely and fair in the application of our rules and regulations with them, but we do not serve them. We serve a greater community. And so you will probably start to see some shifts in the way we do things as a result of that thinking. And I'm not gonna steal thunder from some other content of today's agenda, but you will start to see that. The second thing that I want to talk about briefly is that I had a little pep talk with the staff about is that we are professionals as a staff. We all have expertise. We all have opinions. I would hope that most of the time they're informed opinions, but we, over the years, I think have been relegated to box checkers, and I don't like that. And we're not going to do that anymore. We have received a lot of positive, I guess, support from the city council and county commissioners about really elevating the staff in terms of what they bring in their professional expertise. And so you will be seeing our staff reports are going to be changing. The information that we provide is going to be changing, and the amount that we step out and advocate either for or against a project will be changing. So that's kind of my second point. We are not box checkers. We're not anymore anyway. And then the third thing that I wanted to just kind of quickly share with you all is that, you know, we're never going to have the full trust of the community because we're government, right? There's just folks that no matter what we do, will never like or trust us, and that's okay. We still need to figure out ways to reach and hear from them, even if it's through some secondary intermediary. But one thing that I do think goes a long way towards building trust is for us to get our own house in order. And there are a lot of things that we do as a department that are clunky, that are downright stupid, that are just bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. Some of that involves antiquated regulations that are overly suburban and overly 1980s that we're going to be looking to change. And I know you all have probably heard me say little bits of that here and there in my past roles, but we are going to be looking to really improve the things that we have control over as a department, and then push to advocate to improve the things that are beyond our control. So having said that, I invite if there's any questions for me in particular before we get started with the rest of the agenda, and I turn it back to Brian. Happy to take any.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah. And I would say if you have a question that fits under one of the agenda items, why don't you hold on to it? But if there are questions directly for Sarah, just about her comments, please. Tom?
So I think this is all very good news. I have long looked forward to a time when the staff, with regard to a particular project, told us what it thought, and when we didn't have to try to find it somewhere. And sometimes I read staff reports, maybe incorrectly, where I thought that I was seeing a staff report that had expressed an opinion at some level of production and then had that kind of damped down. But I like the idea that we now will get the benefit of the experience and the opinion, the professional opinion of staff, realizing that I'm probably going to disagree with it more frequently than anybody. That I'm not afraid of. But I think we will get better and truer reports. And I hope that the reports, right now the reports are fairly heavily laden with boilerplate, and I hope that we will replace some of that with what this case is really all about. So I think this is an excellent step forward. But my question, Sarah, is I like what you're saying. How are you going to communicate it to the community?
So that's a great question, Tom. I think some of this will be communicated. And again, I don't want to steal thunder from some of the things you're going to hear later on. But we are looking to do a lot more in terms of engagement with folks, kind of across all sorts of facets. If you have particular ideas of a way to kind of convey these kind of philosophical points of where our vision, where we're going as a department, I'm happy to take them. But I don't have a great answer for you on that.
Well, there's time yet. And we can talk. I don't want to take up, we've got an agenda and I don't want to move off of it. But thank you. I'm encouraged by what you've said. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Great. I just echo, Tom, what you said. I mean, I think that even this level of transparency, just coming here today and sharing those thoughts, I mean, that's going to begin to spread the word. And I think all of us at the Planning Commission are going to embrace this. And I think we look forward to letting you know how's it working from our perspective. And we hope you'll ask us as well in terms of how's it working. But this is great. I'm excited as well and hopeful. All right, before we move to the next item, I do want to just note it was flagged for me that one of the attendees who's joined, I don't see a name, but has called in, raised their hand a little while ago. So Chris, I don't know if you can help just unmute them, and just want to make sure we know who it is and what they may want to share with us.
Chair Busby, this is Carmen. I just wanted to let you guys know that I was here by phone.
All right. Glad you're here.
Don't we need to change your status from attendee to panelist? Can we do that?
She'll have to stay in the attendees, but I can keep her talk permission.
That's fine. I'm actually transitioning because I didn't get off work until 4. So I'm trying to get home to actually log in.
Okay.
Commissioner Williams, this is Grace. I'm going to mark you present.
Thank you.
Great. Carmen, thanks for being with us.
No problem. And thanks, Sarah, for everything that you said. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to everything I know you're going to do.
That's great. All right, well, with that, we'll move to the next item. This is the biggest one on today's agenda. We're going to talk about the new comprehensive plan update and get time for feedback from all of us. So we've got Scott Whiteman and Carl Kolosna are going to kick us off.
Yes, hello, everyone. And I believe Scott will be sharing a presentation through Zoom in just a moment. So I want to quickly introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. My name is Carl Kolosna, and I'm a senior planner with the Planning Department and the Policy and Urban Design team under Scott Whiteman. I also want to introduce, I'm very glad we're able to have her here today, a very special guest, Dr. Aaron Parrish. who I'll be giving some details about how she's been assisting us with the comprehensive plan. But I wanted to give her a real quick opportunity to introduce herself right at the start here.
Hi, thanks, Carl. So I work for the Office of Performance and Innovation, and so I've been with the city for about 3 years, and my background's in cultural anthropology and community engagement. And so I've used that background to design various programs, mainly around criminal justice issues with the city, a driver's license restoration program, a peer support program for people returning home from prison, and a transitional jobs program. And before that, I worked largely internationally, designing development programs and plans in villages where residents were returning from conflict in Colombia, and also different international programs around compromise after conflict. So I've really enjoyed being able to bring those experiences to work back home in Durham and with the planning department.
Great, thank you very much, Aaron. So Scott, if you can go to the next slide, I'll just give a quick overview of some of the main things that we'll be talking about today. We'll be starting with a recap of the listening and learning phase, which was quite a while ago now at this point. It's a lot has happened. Also talking about work with our outreach team, community partners, and focus groups that have been taking place after that first phase of engagement. And then the main reason we have Aaron here with us today, and I'll be doing some discussion on it also, is talking about our qualitative data analysis, working with all of the comments that we've received through this process so far to develop goals and objectives for the comprehensive plan. Then talking also about transit plan coordination with the Durham County Transit Plan is going on at the same time as the comp plan, and there's obvious overlap and opportunities there. And then our next round of engagement ambassadors, which is right in the midst of getting up and running as we speak, and then some other upcoming work. So looking forward to it. So first to talk through, we'll just give a quick recap of kind of where we started. This is our listening and learning phase, which occurred November of last year. And basically the idea is it was a discussion around two main questions. And that was, what does your ideal Durham look like to you, and what else is on your mind about Durham? And we discussed these questions in a number of formats. The first was a big series of public meetings, the listening and learning sessions, which there's a picture of there. But then we also supplemented that with our engagement ambassador program, which was stipended folks who came from communities who may not typically have been represented well in the planning process. And we also had an online survey that we worked through with that. So we also were able to coordinate that with the transit plan. So there was discussion, not just of all things comprehensive plan related, but also transit plan connection as well. So then looking at the next slide, that phase, we heard from over 1,000 residents in that first phase of engagement, and 600 of those were through the engagement ambassador program, which I mentioned before. So there's detailed information about the demographics and literally every single comment from both of those, as well as the online survey. It is worth noting, I think, just here saying that the folks we were able to reach and engage through the engagement ambassador program were much more representative of the diversity of Durham as compared to the big public workshops. So that was a sort of a reaction and a change in approach that we took after seeing who we were reaching and who we were not reaching from those first big series of public meetings. So then going on to the next one, obviously that was in November. Next slide. So that was in November, and we had many plans of what we were going to be doing in the spring. And then of course, COVID-19 came. So equitable engagement is even more challenging than it was before, but we also know it's even more important than it was ever. And we just want to note that it is taking more time and resources, and there have been some changes to our procedures and process and our original goal, and we're trying to adapt in this environment. So many people, everyone I think is probably doing this to some degree or another, but this is how it touches our plan in particular. So then going to the next one, after our listening and learning sessions and after the engagement program, the first session of it, over the summer, we started to try and figure out frankly, whether equitable engagement was even possible in a digital environment, or how to do it effectively, or how to supplement it with in-person, socially distanced, responsible engagement. So we were able to work with community partners through the city's Neighborhood Improvement Services Department to pilot some of those engagement strategies. So working with NIS and also the Transportation Department, we were able to engage residents in socially distanced in-person events, including, there's a picture of one of them there, the street share. And so there were groups in particular, Spirit House, Ivywood Consulting, and Upstream Works Collaborative, part of our community partners, assisting in the development of that engagement. So we had virtual gatherings of community partners, looking at more in-depth input around the specific topics that came up the most in our first round of engagement. And again, trying to understanding who we didn't reach in that first round, starting to fill in some of those gaps and doing intentional engagement to reach those groups and talks about topics that are important. So looking at the next thing, also sort of in that vein, in our first round of engagement, we identified 3 key groups that we didn't engage as successfully as we'd hoped. And those were youth, Northern Durham or generally rural residents, and also Hispanic and Latino or Spanish speaking residents. So we knew coming out of the listening and learning phase and even the engagement ambassador phase that we needed to include and incorporate those perspectives, and we needed to do intentional engagement to do that. So we've been working to ensure that we're getting those perspectives by hosting a series of focus groups, working with a number of the organizations I mentioned before, both in the city and the county, and also the Office on Youth, Youth Listening Project. So we had, we were able to, my knowledge, it was one of the first engagement events that was done with simultaneous interpretation for English and Spanish that city staff attended and held on September 24th. That we got some really positive feedback from. And we're, like I said, currently coordinating with the Office on Youth, looking at their youth listening project and incorporating the results and conclusions from that project. And then we're currently in the process of working and have just secured a scheduling for a meeting that'll be happening in early December with some of our rural residents in Bahama and Rougemont and areas like that. So then going on to, I think, what will probably be some of the larger part of this presentation, why we've got Aaron here, is talking about the qualitative data analysis process. So that's sort of some fancy words, but I'll give a little bit of background. So as we realized, our previous plan was that we were going to have a lot of in-person interaction and work around co-developing and co-creating these goals with the community. But we realized, obviously, with COVID-19, it was going to be infeasible to do in-person engagement around those things. And, you know, for at least a couple of months at that point, we weren't really sure. So what we started doing since mid-August is we've been working on a qualitative data analysis process under the guidance of Dr. Aaron Parrish, who's here with us with the Office of Performance on Innovation. So working towards those community goals, staff is analyzing all of the comments from the listening and learning phase of the engagement, all of the engagement pilots with our community partners that we've been mentioning, street shares, focus groups. There's a lot of material, literally thousands and thousands of comments. So working with those to develop goals and objectives for the comprehensive plan. So in doing that, we prioritized drafting objectives around housing and transportation first. And throughout all of it, we were prioritizing the feedback from the engagement ambassadors and groups that we know that we haven't reached, or trying to lift up those voices in the process. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Aaron Parrish and let her describe in a little bit more detail exactly what that process is, and we'll be happy to answer any questions about that process.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, I want to start with the fact that the draft objectives are not the result of a couple of planners sitting in their sweatpants on the couch writing a comprehensive plan, but instead they come from a group of people with a diverse background that aren't all planners, with a diverse lived experience, that are following a structure and process that's designed to help the voices of 1,000 people guide the writing of these goals and objectives. And one of the core values of all of the engagement that has happened with the comprehensive plan is how do we evaluate, how do we elevate the expertise of residents and their lived experience? And how do we use that lived experience as the source material for writing how we hope to plan the future of our community? And specifically, how do we listen to, respect, and honor the voices of residents who have been disinvested in and actively harmed by planning in the past? And this data set has really allowed us to do this. I mean, it's a very rich and large data set that we can filter according to the kind of engagement that occurred and the racial demographics of the people who participated in that kind of engagement. And I really want to commend the planning department in putting in the labor of turning resident feedback into data sets. And that is hard work, and it's work that actually isn't often done. If I had a TED Talk, it would be on how we do engagement and the forms of engagement that we use. Because often, and I mean, as a public administrator, I can say this, but this goes for any hat you wear, I think, we oftentimes use engagement processes and tools that are easy for us to analyze. And that means like easy for getting the people around the table and easy to analyze the results. And this kind of engagement that, that the planning department has done with the comprehensive plan has been really hard to analyze, but very welcoming to residents. And so I think that we've gotten a really rich set of data and really rich set of voices from that work. So that was to begin. And next is, and then, how we worked with that qualitative data. So both qualitative and quantitative data, any kind of data analysis that you're doing, 90% of it is going to be cleaning. It's going to be cleaning and structuring. So this was an enormous data set. So we started off, they had already, every quote that every resident had said had already been coded according to topic. And there were about 70 different topics. So what we did was basically created umbrella topics. So there would be housing, transit, environment, and we looked at what codes might fit under that umbrella. So for housing, for example, there were probably about 15 or 20 different topics and codes that would fit under housing. So to name a few, belonging, gentrification and displacement, growth and development, housing was its own code, homelessness, McDougall Terrace. And we took all of the quotes and observations that had been coded under that sort of universe of housing and said, okay, what are the patterns that we see? What are the stories that begin to emerge from all of these voices? And how do we cluster and make sense of those patterns? And so some of this, when I do work pre-COVID, the clustering would be done with physical Post-it notes. And in this new world order, we did that with Jamboards. If y'all have kids you might be using Jamboard for their classes, and it's been really good for this qualitative data work. But basically, you're picking the illustrative quotes and you're clustering them according to shared themes and shared topics. So in Next, what do we do there? We work towards clarity. So this entire process, it's very iterative, and we're moving back and forth, and we're trying to further and further and further understand clearly what are people saying, right? And so we did that by answering a series of structured questions. So first, what are these residents saying in the quotes? What are we hearing? Like, what brings these clusters together and what unifies it? What does it mean and why does it matter, right? So that's the kind of first step. Then the second step is to take an equity lens and say who benefits and who's being burdened by what we're seeing here. And then the final step is, how does this fit in a comprehensive plan? Can we make policies about this? What would these policies look like at a neighborhood level and at a community level? And once we can answer all of those questions, we have pretty close to the source material of what a draft objective could look like. So then we wrote draft objectives, and we wrote all of those draft objectives in the voice of residents. So every draft objective starts with we need. We need dignified, welcoming, and healthy housing, or we need innovative housing options. So voice matters, and we tried to be very intentional in writing in the voice of the residents who are the source material for these objectives. And now, we have draft objectives for housing, for transit, for jobs, and we're really close to draft objectives for the environment as well. We've already shared some of these objectives with staff and with the outreach team. And I think all of these objectives are stories, and they're stories for the kind of future we want to build for Durham. Brene Brown is probably the most famous qualitative researcher and the only qualitative researcher anyone might know. And she says that maybe stories are just data with soul. And that's what I like to think about with qualitative data, that it brings nuance and it brings depth and heart to how we hear, understand, and respect residents' voices. And one of the bits of feedback from the outreach team that really stuck with me is there's a lot of heart in these objectives. And, I think that's the goal. We want these objectives and these goals to reflect our shared values as a community. And I think that Durham is a town with a lot of heart. And so we want those values to come and shine forth in what we're doing in this comprehensive plan and how we're guiding how we build our future together. And with that, I will toss it back to Carl.
Great. Thank you very much, Aaron. So I'm sure we'll have many questions. We'll ready for questions at the end. I just have a few more slides. So talking about transit plan coordination, as people are aware, there's ongoing Durham County transit plan. So throughout this work, we've been working closely to coordinate with the comprehensive plan, the transit plan, to engage residents around those two plans together as much as possible, because there is so much natural linkage between land use planning and transportation planning. So I think particularly we've been successful throughout the whole time, but particularly in the last couple of months, maybe the last 6 months, that's really come together. We're really seeing good coordination. So we have online survey and stakeholder interviews that are ensuring residents are provided with background information on the comp plan and opportunities to engage further. And in the engagement ambassador sessions, the residents are going to be engaging both around the transit plan and goals and objectives, and specifically around the goals and objectives related to housing and neighborhoods for the comprehensive plans, which were probably the two, housing and transportation, were pretty much the two biggest topics that came out of the entire body of data and work. So we're also coordinating this cycle with participatory budgeting to look for opportunities to address more immediate needs that have been raised through the engagement so far, and particularly those issues that have been made worse by COVID. We understand that the comprehensive plan is a long-range plan, and when we talk to people, and we were very intentional about it, that we didn't just ask, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of Durham, but what's on your mind about Durham right now, today? And we know we can't wait 10, 15, 20 years for those things to change or slowly percolate through slow-moving policy. There are many things that need to be done really as soon as possible. So participatory budgeting is an opportunity to do that in many ways. So last, we're talking about the engagement ambassadors on the next slide. So in collaboration with the transit team, we've been recruiting engagement ambassadors over the last few weeks, and trainings for those engagement ambassadors have already begun. And I believe our first session, we know we have one session today, and I believe there may have been one yesterday. So we were just beginning. This is our second phase, second round of engagement ambassadors. So we have approximately 50 residents who filled out the recruitment form for the ambassadors this time. And those who responded are connected to residents across all of our focus communities, including some of the representation from some of those areas that we know we didn't do a good job, or as good a job as we would have wanted to in the first round, such as youth, Spanish-speaking people, Hispanic and Latino, North Durham, and rural residents. So the engagement ambassador data and the responses and the demographic response of that is looking better already. And of course, like the first round, we'll be sharing all of this information out just as soon as it's ready. So we plan to continue working with engagement ambassadors beyond the coordinated transit plan engagement window. The transit plan is a slightly shorter term project, so there will be remaining objectives and remaining things to do with the comprehensive plan after that. And we certainly have been very happy with how the engagement ambassador program has gone so far, and we believe there's even more room to improve and iterate on it. So that's where we're going next. So looking at the next slide, small group engagement. So we are looking to arrange some small group engagement around specific objectives, particularly with community partners who we worked with over the summer, and some of the neighborhoods that have been organizing in response to proposed developments near their neighborhoods. So again, as Dr. Parrish mentioned, this is an iterative process. When we identify gaps, or we identify maybe we didn't hear as much as we think we needed to, or there's gaps in the data, then we want to go back out and fill those gaps by doing intentional equitable engagement with groups that are representative of the interests that we're looking at, and specifically looking at the topics that we're looking at. So our last slide thinking about upcoming work. So our primary focus is going to be engaging residents around the draft goals and objectives. So that's going to be done in a multi-pronged approach. One is, as with the first time, through the engagement ambassador programs and those focused small group engagement for more in-depth input. And then also we're going to be rolling out a broader digital engagement platform through a platform called Social Pinpoint to share the goals and objectives. There's a lot of text in them, so people will be able to read all of them. They'll be side by side with quotes, and there'll be all of the information, all of the raw input, and there'll also be information daylighting the process, going into even more detail about exactly how we moved from thousands and thousands of quotes into these goals and objectives to make sure that we're keeping ourselves accountable and centering community voices as we're going through that process. So we're working towards having those community goals and objectives for the comprehensive plan adopted by elected officials by spring of next year. But we know that may be impacted by current pandemic impacts at different points between then and now. But as of right now, that is our plan. And like I said, Dr. Parrish mentioned, many of those objectives should be getting rolled out quite soon. So with that, I think I'm done with this. I have myself and a couple of other members of our team, as well as Sarah Young and Scott Whiteman here for any questions or discussion or anything we can help to clarify about the comprehensive plan process as of yet.
That's great. Thank you, Carl. And commissioners, any questions or feedback? And you might target it to a specific individual if you can. Tom?
So one of the things that's worried me about this process very early on in it, before we had our COVID shutdown, I know that my own neighborhood organization asked for a kind of in-face meeting, to set up an in-face meeting from some of the neighborhoods in Northwest Central Durham, and were essentially turned away, which had kind of a souring effect on the whole process. Is it too late for them to meet and participate, or is that phase of this over?
I think I'll defer to Supervisor Scott Whiteman here.
So I don't remember that exact request. I don't know when that was. But certainly, yeah, the initial input phase is over. As we said all along, we're going to focus our resources on trying to reach people who don't normally participate in the process. And
well, that was the response that was saying. And so the question is, though, do we actually have a valid engagement process where we have turned away people?
Did they not have the opportunity to come to the listening and learning sessions?
They did have the opportunity to go to the listening and learning sessions, and some people did. All of those were located at some considerable physical distance away from the area that I'm talking about. And the request came afterwards saying, and was an offer to pull together people in 3 neighborhoods to talk about the entire process, not any particular development issue.
So let me chime in here because I do remember when we talked about this. And the truth is we don't have the bandwidth to be catering to specific requests from neighborhoods throughout the entire process. So Scott is right. That is why we have definitely put a priority on reaching folks that don't have the means necessarily to be heard. I think a lot of the neighborhoods that we traditionally hear from are folks that have means, ability to voice their concerns. And so either through the online engagement or through the sessions, we felt like that should have offered ample opportunity. We had 5 different locations for folks to participate. I will say that having seen what has come out of those, I would be really surprised if the folks in these neighborhoods had some had something to offer that wasn't already on the list, because the amount of feedback that we got was extensive. So now certainly, and I think I did say this before, as we move into finer grained planning, there will be additional opportunities. But those are upcoming, and we're not, certainly able to go backwards now in terms of goals. That phase, the listening and learning phase, has ended.
I just think it's a stumble.
All right, thanks, Tom. Others who, and while I'm waiting for other folks to raise their hand, either actually or virtually, Carl, I had a question. You had talked about, the next phase, and I understand that the timeline might get pushed back given the pandemic situation that we're still struggling with, but do you give us a sense of kind of what's the timing that you think in terms of sharing the information with the public? Then I believe it then comes to the Planning Commission and then to the governing bodies. What's your best sense of that? And I'm mostly interested in the phase where it goes back out to the public and they have time to really digest it and share their thoughts as it then moves through the rest of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sort of a digital engagement platform that I mentioned, Social Pinpoint, it will be the platform where all of the goals and objectives live and are viewable. And we're working on platforms for people to be able to respond to them, perhaps make comments on them, give feedback for them. We're working on that as quickly as we possibly can, but we're really hoping, and I think we're on track to be able to start rolling that out in the early part of December. So we're really only looking at a couple, maybe 3 or 4 weeks away. We did mention the goals are kind of we worked on them in chunks, doing the housing and transportation ones first. So at the very least, that first chunk of objectives and goals, I think, should be viewable very soon in the next couple of weeks. And then the small group engagement through the engagement ambassadors and the small focus groups is where we're also going back and doing community checks with the drafted goals and objectives that we have as is, making iterative changes to them after the broad engagement that happens through Social Pinpoint through December and January. There may be, additional rounds of refining, but obviously all going towards the idea of having, a fairly good draft of goals and objectives that are then ready for adoption by City Council in the spring of next year.
And does it just go to the council, or will it come through the Planning Commission and that gives an additional public comment period opportunity? I'm just trying to get a sense of how long is it out in the public sphere and how many opportunities will there be for people to really engage with the information before it goes to a final vote? Yeah, absolutely. So it will be going through the Planning Commission. It's part of the regular adoption process. So of course, I'm sure Planning Commission and both staff knows the more lead time and the more coordination there is, before, we don't want this to be the goals and objectives are being rolled out the day before the Planning Commission hearing, but there will be a process. Planning Commission will review them and issue an advisory vote on it, just like any other case or anything like that. And please, Scott or Sarah, please feel free to correct me if I didn't get any of the details on that exactly right, but that was my understanding. Yeah, so Carl is correct. We want these to be adopted as kind of the part of the comprehensive plan. I think we talked about that at your last, one of your previous retreats in the before times, that we wanted to adopt the plan in phases. So we weren't waiting for the whole, until 2022 to have something to guide us in 2020, and as opposed to our comp plan from 2005. We will try our best to present them to you the month before you all have to act on them so that you have some time. But like Carl said, these times are strange. And so we're doing our best. That makes sense. Okay. Thanks to both of you. Yep. Jessley? I'm sorry, Carl, if you have
No,
something.
I was just going to add, when many of our planning commissioners are on the listservs that we have, we will be certain to notify and to send an intentional email and reach out proactively to you all when Social Pinpoint is live and when the objectives are ready.
Yeah,
That's great.
you all are certainly welcome to participate as residents and interested parties before it comes to the commission to vote on. There's nothing that prohibits that.
Okay, thank you. Jessley?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a different perspective on the neighborhood meeting issue that Tom raised earlier. I attended one of the listening and learning sessions, and I thought it was so well done and offered a great opportunity for input. Having heard the community call overwhelmingly for more equitable planning and engagement, and living in the real world where resources are limited, in the planning department, I think it takes a lot of courage to make that kind of decision, to allocate your resources in a certain way, and to explicitly own up to that. So I just want to commend that, putting your money where your mouth is. Understand there's different perspectives on it, but wanted to add that additional thought. So thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners, anyone else who want to ask questions or offer any feedback? All right, I don't see anyone else, so I think we are good to move then to the next item, but thanks to all of you. I mean, this has been, I'm excited. It's been very deliberate. I know it's been really hard to do this stuff, especially now. Interested in hearing the feedback from the ambassadors as the second round gets going. And I'm very excited about this notion that there's going to be this interactive opportunity for feedback. Then it comes to us for a presentation. And then there's a month before we have the actual public hearing. I think that's just going to allow it. We need more time than ever to spread the word. So I like this very thoughtful approach that all of you on staff have put forward today. So thanks to all of you, and I look forward to seeing hearing about the next steps and keeping it moving forward.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Next, we're going to talk about the Southeast Durham Small Area Plan, and we've given about 45 minutes for a presentation and for any questions. And I know we got a video in advance, I believe, as well, to take a look at. So I hope all of you were able to actually watch that as well. But we're going to hand it back to Scott and to Carl to kick us off.
So good evening again, everyone. I'm going to try to present this and do my own PowerPoint presentation, which could be very dangerous, but there we go. All right, so just a little bit of background on this. I'm sure I'm not surprising any of you all to know that there is a huge amount of development activity that's happening in the Southeast Durham area. This is an area where this city has put in some infrastructure that is kind of driving development demand. We got a request from the city council and the city manager's office to see if we could find a way to do some sort of small area plan for this area, since there is so much activity going on. We were always planning as part of the comprehensive plan. There are certain parts of town where there's more vacant land, more activity going on, where are going to be more complicated, where while we weren't planning on doing small area plans per se, we're going to have to spend more time and being more careful with our planning. Thinking of places like Bragtown, where there's an existing community, but there's also quite a bit of vacant land that's kind of experiencing development pressures. So we committed to the council and the city administration that we would bring forward a type of small area plan for this area in the spring to help provide guidance for all these cases that we're seeing. So just a little bit of background. If you saw the video, these slides, all the slides you're seeing for the most part were in that presentation. They've just been reorganized slightly to kind of lead up to the what we're thinking about doing for the the small area plan. So the area that's known as, we're calling Southeast Durham, it's also sometimes referred to as Searles, which is named after because the sewer lift station that's out there is the Southeast Regional Lift Station. Although we determined that naming a part of town after a piece of sewer infrastructure is probably not a great idea. So the area is, for the most part, it's US 70 on the south, Sharon Road on the east, the NC 98 and the suburban rural tier boundary on the north, and Wake County and the city limits on the east. This is an area, so all the stuff you're seeing, we actually planned for. In 2005, the comprehensive plan extended what was then called the urban growth boundary, now known as the suburban tier, all the way out to the critical watershed boundary in this area, which kind of allowed a greater level of growth than was in our previous plans. It was primarily planned for low density residential. You can see all the yellows on the map. It's low density 4 units or less, very low density 2 units or less, a little bit of low medium density, which is 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre, with a little bit of commercial on the edges. And for the most part, that is exactly what we're seeing for all the cases that are coming out here. Oops. And sorry, my mouse is a little excited. So, so there's definitely stuff going on out here before the 2005 comprehensive plan. There's always been, not always, but there's been a lot of demand for residential in this area. You can imagine why. It's very close to Research Triangle Park. It's pretty easy to get to downtown Durham. It's really easy to get to North Raleigh. So it's a very strategic location. And there was even activity here before the 2005 comprehensive plan. Brightleaf at the park, which is a gigantic, I think roughly 2,000 units. What development was approved in 2001. We had Ravenstone in 2003, which is up in the kind of northeast corner of this area. There was a previous version of what's now called Fendel Farms, which was approved in 2004 on Doc Nichols Road. And then, of course, planning and development pressures do not stop at the county line or the city limits. A whole lot of activity has happened just on the other side of the line in Wake County, in the Briar Creek area, which started developing in 2001. There's a whole lot of commercial in that area, as you probably know. There's a lot of kind of, subsequently there came a lot of office development and medical offices, and there's even a branch of Wake Med over there in that area now. And so all of that just kind of creates even more demand on the Durham side now. And so even before the current batch of cases, we got a whole lot of residential demand in this area, and a whole lot of cases were approved. It was about a little over 2,500 residential units were approved between 2011 and 2018. And we have, well, the time this slide was put together, we had about 3,700 under review. The ones in yellow have been approved subsequently by City Council since October. So that's about, I think it's adds up to about 1,900 units. And so, sorry. So the city and the county have put investments in this area to accommodate the growth that's been happening for 20 years. There's a nice little picture of it down there, particularly after the Del Webb development, now known as Carolina Arbors, went in. It was clear that the fire and EMS response times for that part of town were very substandard. So the city partnered with the county to build a joint fire station, EMS station that's now staffed and is set up to serve most of the eastern half of the Southeast Durham area. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, there's the Southeast Regional Lift Station. This is, These slides are from our friends at the Water Management Department. I hope I do them proud when I try to explain what's on them. With all these developments that were happening out here, there was kind of a Band-Aid approach to utility planning. And so each big development that went in added 1 or 2 sewer lift stations. And for those of you who don't think about sewer infrastructure as much as I do, sewer service generally follows gravity. Sewage flows downhill. When you're in a place with hills, it doesn't always work so well that you can have all of your sewer lines flow downhill to the treatment plant. So you need to build lift stations, or also sometimes called pump stations, to basically pump the sewage uphill into the next place where it can be served by a gravity line. And so all these developments that started out here started building all these lift stations. And for each lift station the city takes on as part of its sewer infrastructure is creates a maintenance liability basically in the future. So I think I've heard from Water Management that a unit served by a lift station, it usually costs about 3 times more to serve it with sewer service than it does from one that's served by gravity. So as all these were going on out here, and with, you can see here, there were certain other developments that were coming in and proposing new lift stations. The city determined in 2015 that the most physically prudent approach would be to have the city plan out this entire basin for how it would be served by sewer. The city would put in some lines to take some of the existing lift stations offline so they could all be served by one regionally planned lift station, which is here, the Searle station, and then plan out for the rest of the area what it would take for it to be served, what kind of size of the lines, location of the lines would it take to serve the entire area if it were built out at the densities that were proposed in the comprehensive plan. And then as development came in, the developers would be responsible for building the lines, but however, the city had already planned out. And so the developers would have to build lines that would be oftentimes bigger than what they would need to serve just their development. They'd be planned to serve developments upstream as well. So as part of this is under construction. I believe it was approved in 2015. And the cost of this whole project, the city's cost, is about $49 million. In order to pay for it, a basin fee was adopted by the city council. And so for each property that gets annexed and has an approved extension agreement, there's a fee for each residential unit it's in the little over $5,000 per unit. And so with each development gets approved, that helps pay back the cost of this lift station. It's just another picture. It also, sorry. I wish I couldn't see you right now, Commissioner Miller. It includes a series of infrastructure that's outside of this area so that it can eventually, all the sewage from this area eventually goes to the North Durham treatment plant on Club Boulevard. So in addition to all the sewer, and there's water issues, water is a lot less complicated to serve. I'm sure you've heard from all the cases that have been in front of you, there's some transportation challenges in this area. Most of the streets that will become the kind of collector roads when the area builds out are substandard state maintained roads such as Olive Branch Road, Doc Nichols Road, Leesville Road, Kemp Road. These are on the state system. They are low priority state roads. The state, some of them have only been paved recently, so they're very thin pavement, probably not designed to handle a lot of urban or suburban development. However, there's the example we have here is Andrews Chapel Road. This one, The Del Webb development, because it had a lot of frontage, they were able to upgrade that street to city street standards. And because the adjacent development annexed into the city could take it over for maintenance. What we're finding with a lot of other developments in this area is that they have very little frontage on the state maintained roads. So there's very limited ability for the city to require upgrades. And even if we required offsite upgrades, the city could not accept it for maintenance because it's outside the city limits. In addition, there's also existing congestion on some of the kind of the larger roadways on the edge, Highway 98, Sharon Road, US 70. Some of this congestion is coming from development in this area. A lot of it is commuter traffic coming from Wake County going to the park. There's very limited transit service in the area. I think, to my recollection, the only transit stop is at the Harris Teeter that's on the very southeastern corner, right next to the city of Raleigh. There is also the Metropolitan Transportation Plan has a freeway conversion for US 70. This provides some challenges because oftentimes local governments and the state DOT don't necessarily agree on how freeways are designed and the connectivity across them. In addition, until the final design is approved, it's likely going to leave a lot of kind of development limbo effect on the properties that are along US 70, particularly since it would be hard to get access to US 70 if it's going to be a future freeway. So there are also a lot of environmental challenges in this area. I know it's a little hard to see on this slide, but all of the little squiggly blue lines are the streams and the required 50-foot buffer. In the area kind of in the middle here, where you're seeing the most interest right now, there are a lot of streams, and it's really hard to design anything other than kind of a standard suburban subdivision with cul-de-sacs when you have this many streams. So I know there's been some discussion of having better connectivity, more walkable developments. When you have this many streams, it's hard to do. There are some, when you get to the edges around Highway 98 and Highway 70, and then kind of closer to Wake County and the city of Raleigh, you're in a different watershed, and there's a lot fewer environmental constraints, and there's a lot more opportunity for kind of more urban or mixed use development in those areas, or non-residential development. We also have the red is a steep slope. So this is kind of some of the hilliest area in Durham that's yet to develop. There's also the yellow is a state designated natural heritage area. These are mostly areas of kind of high quality woodlands that are along the streams that provide good wildlife habitat and wildlife corridors. So the challenge is, as this area is developing, we also need to find ways to preserve these environmentally sensitive areas. And so we have quite a few existing entitlements in this area and existing developed areas. Some of these green ones and blue ones that were shown here as being under consideration have now been approved. We do still have quite a few cases, and there's some, I believe there's some new cases that have come in since this map was produced that we're going to have to basically plan around. Although that does limit the area that we need to discuss for the plan of where development might occur in the future. And then another thing to keep in mind is that nothing is zoned for nothing. The areas even outside the city limits that don't have utilities are zoned rural residential for the most part, which it's a 30,000 square foot minimum lot size. If you have sewer and water, it's a minimum 1 acre lot size if you're on well and septic. We haven't seen very much well and septic development out in this part of town, but this map, aerial map here, just shows the line here is the Wake Durham County line. All these lots are large lot developments just north of the city of Raleigh and Raleigh's watershed, where there's been a lot of large lot developments with community well and septic. So there is while we don't know for sure if the demand for that and the ability to serve that in Durham County is there, there's always the potential that even if we deny rezonings and annexations, there still could be even more suburban style development that happens. So that our challenge with the plan, the key things we're going to look at is, are there areas in Southeast Durham where the infrastructure isn't in place yet, that's not served by the existing fire station, where sewer lines have not been built or committed yet, that can be phased to a later time, so that the entire, I can't remember how big it is, but so that the entire area is not under development pressure at the same time, so we can concentrate new development in areas where we have actually already invested in infrastructure. We want to look for opportunities for higher density or more transit supportive development. I know that is one of the big criticisms of what's going out in this area, is that although there isn't transit there now, the types of development that are going in there would be very difficult to serve with transit. And so there may be some opportunities for that in some parts of this area that aren't reflected in the current comprehensive plan. We also want to identify areas for non-residential uses or mixed use development. As you saw in the future land use map on the second slide, almost the entire area is designated for low density residential. So there's very limited opportunities for small scale commercial or any employment oriented uses. And in the areas that have significant environmental constraints, what densities and intensities and types of housing or types of land uses can they actually support? And what qualities are we looking for as a community for those developments? Is it a greater level of environmental protection? Is it a greater mix of housing types? Those sorts of things. And then also, if we'll look for opportunities, and I know the Planning Commission's policy committee is also looking at some of these, if there are strategies to update the UDO to modernize residential suburban standards. So our schedule, we want to begin community engagement in January. This is going to be challenging, and we're certainly open to input. It's going to have to be almost or exclusively online engagement, since most of the neighborhoods out here are brand new. There's not a lot of established groups. I know most of them probably have homeowners associations. I think Commissioner Morgan lives in one of the neighborhoods out here. Maybe he can hook us up with some of his friends. But we're going to have to find ways to engage the community in this COVID environment and in an area where most of the developments are relatively new. Our goal is to have something adopted by the council in late spring. You'll notice that's about the same time that we want to have the community goals adopted. So we're going to have to coordinate. Our hope is to have the community goals adopted first and then to have this come right after it. But we want to make sure that we don't have both on either the Planning Commission's or the governing body's agenda at the same time, because that would be a lot. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback.
Thanks, Scott. David, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. A couple thoughts that come to my mind, Scott, when you're presenting that. I know certainly in our neighborhood, I'm in the Carolina Arbors neighborhood there. We have a very active HOA group. In fact, there are a number of people that have volunteered that do work with the city. So it could be a good place to start. But I guess what I thought was, is there a way to kind of put something together? I know Patterson Place or Patterson Park, when we did some work with that, that was kind of around some of the transit planning with the light rail expected at that time to go through it. Would there be something like that with this southeast area? I know you kind of mentioned some of the challenges of trying to build a nucleus with the environmental part of it and everything, but have you given any thought towards, targeted areas that might make sense?
Certainly, as we talked about in the previous presentation, the county transit plan is currently being updated as well. There are certainly opportunities to possibly extend transit out into this area, and then that would obviously be the place where it would make sense to plan around, have more density or more transit supported uses. But at the moment, we'll don't know how well the schedules will line up. But that is certainly something we'll look at.
Yeah, it just seems like the commercial opportunities are connecting through with Briar Creek to the south and up to 98 to the north. Those are probably the two areas where there's commercial development now. Looking out and seeing a lot of it as being, farmland and, very low density type housing. I just wondered if there was any areas that seemed to be ripe for that type of development, kind of more centralized in that. Because I know when we're looking at a lot of the cases coming up, our big concern is traffic, also accessibility, and then something where, public transit could actually be plugged into that area.
Yeah, we'll certainly coordinate with the
Sure.
folks working on the transit plans to.
Yeah, and if you need any folks to community to get involved, I know a few people in Fendel Farms and certainly as well Carolina Place, Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean there are places where I know a lot of these people are retirees, they have time, and they're interested in more, what they can do with the community. And a lot of them are transplants from the north and would be very interested in getting their hands dirty.
Thanks. We'd appreciate any contacts you have.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, I see you joined us. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. No? Okay. All right, Tom?
So I think this is a great idea, but I have to say I'm a little concerned. Were we told about this being in the works and I forgot? Or when was the first time we knew this was happening? Is this it?
This is probably it. This is something the decision was made to do this until October. So
my concern is that I might have considered several cases in this area differently if I had known this was in the offing. And so I'm a little bit miffed, not much. I think it's a great idea, but I mean, we just had a couple of cases in this area. And I know the developers went away mad. And I might have considered those cases differently. I might not have. Had I known that we had a process at the front end that was on a fairly quick schedule, that might address some of the worst concerns that we've seen here. And so that, I guess that's kind of my complaint, but I'll leave it at that since it can't be fixed.
Well, Tom,
at least we know now.
Well, and Tom, before you go
Brian, I'm talking now, please.
I know, but I want to clarify something, Tom.
Well, I have more to say.
I know. I would like to, Tom, I just want to ask one question of staff.
That's okay, Mr. Chairman. I'll stop. Thank you.
Okay. Well, my clarification, and then I'll hand it back to you, Tom, is that Grace, did you send us an email the day of this presentation? Am I vaguely remembering that correctly? So they sent us a link. I didn't watch it until they sent it back to us before this meeting, but
that's not a clarification. That's now. I got that link. I watched it, but that was after we had handled a whole bunch of cases. That was the purpose of my question. When was this process started?
I understood your question, Tom. They sent it to us the day it was happening. I wish I'd known it earlier too, but I want to make sure I understood what you were saying.
And so it really matters to me who the stakeholders are, and I'm glad that Mr. Morgan addressed some of that. I do think some of those people who would be good, who have the faith and confidence of their community, have identified themselves in some of these cases. And I think particularly of the gentleman whose name I cannot remember now, but who was kind of the community leader in the most recent case that was for the townhouse project on Fendel Farms. I met with that man and some of his neighbors on several occasions, and I think he would be a great person to bring into this. I would also like to know kind of how this is going, because these cases are coming on, and I'm worried that there are so many cases in the works and so many cases now pending approval before the commission that if they all got approved, that the planning process we're talking about is kind of the planning equivalent of closing the barn door after the horse is gone. And I hope that the council will hold off a little bit to let this happen, because I think it's badly needed. And then has the staff considered for public engagement pulling together an advisory committee rather than surveys and that kind of approach to community engagement? I'm a believer in well-chosen advisory committees to guide along small area planning. Again, it takes, you've got to include all the stakeholders, which I hope will include some of the people in the development community. I don't know if the rest of you had this opportunity, but I know sometime after the COVID shutdown, perhaps at the last spring or sometime during the summer, I've forgotten exactly when it was, I was invited to a sit down among several developers. It was kind of headed up by Jamie Schwedler, and got a talking to about what the Planning Commission was doing in this area. It was my understanding that they were also going to city council people and giving them the same talking to. It had to do with the lift station, and the argument was if you don't approve of our request for redevelopment or request for development in the area, the citizens are going to be stuck with the cost of the lift station, and it'll be your fault. And so I don't know if the rest of you got that, but I thought it was an interesting presentation, and I believe that they kind of took it to the council afterwards. So again, I'll finish where I started. I think this is a really great idea. There are several places in our jurisdiction where I think we ought to be doing this. And I hope that we can fix this. I tend to agree with staff that no matter what we do, we're going to wind up with a form of suburban development. And that's why I think that at the same time we do this kind of planning in this geographic area, that we need to look at coming up with new suburban development standards. So frequently my objection to these developments isn't so much their density or where they are proposed to be located, it's how the developments will perform in their locations, and so that they won't just be, my fear is that we're going to just let Briar Creek spill over into Durham County. Not that all of that is necessarily bad, but I think it could be better. And since Durham's growth is going to happen in these undeveloped suburban areas, I think we really need to have a better idea about what minimum standards for these developments are. I'm worried that we're going to have very high density automobile oriented development where people have to get in their cars to go to even the most basic amenities, and that we will create communities which don't have what I call 100-year staying power, will not become places that people will want to live in and become special places over time, like especially with amenities like parks and what have you. It's all very difficult. We have turned down some projects because we thought the roads were inadequate, but we're not hardly in a position to fix the road situation. And so I worry about all of these things. So this planning process, if you can think about it all together in a kind of a comprehensive way, is really good. I think this is a real positive step forward. But in the future, as a planning commission member, but not speaking for the planning commission, excuse me, when these things get started, I think we ought to get a little bit of a briefing so that it can inform the way we handle cases. Sometimes I feel like we are the last to know when, since our role is only advisory, the quality of our advice, I think, is affected by that. If we are going to be in an advisory only role, then we should have the best information available when we consider cases so that our advice will not be considered stale or old hat by the time the people we are advising get it. And those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Nate, you had your hand up for a while and then put it down. So I want to, if you want to, the floor is yours if you would like it.
Sure. I'm not going to take a lot of time because honestly, Tom said a lot of the things that I wanted to say. I think that this small area plan is so important. We cannot afford to continue to do the same thing over and over and over until that whole part of Durham is built out. So I am very happy that it's been called to everyone's attention and that there has been enough sort of jumping up and down and waving of arms to grab attention and to direct resources to a small area planning process there. 6 months is remarkably ambitious, and if you can do that, then congratulations. I think if it can be done within a year, that would be a major achievement and very positive. And I think the public engagement is going to be important, maybe not as important as sort of a neighborhood plan or the comprehensive plan because of the focus on greenfield areas. And I think, looking at really good, high quality case studies and projects that have been done in other places. I think maybe take a look at like the Davidson, North Carolina small area plan, rural area plan that was adopted in 2016, and a few other case studies. And I think that will be a good an important part of the process. So I'm really pleased that this is happening. Things need to change, and I'm happy to see some of the things that you included, Scott, on the last couple of slides. Some of the bullet points that you had, I think, kind of hit the mark. I will be watching, and I will be interested in updates as it moves forward.
Thanks, Nate. Armir?
Yeah, good afternoon. I want to echo what I heard from both Commissioner Miller and Baker. Nothing has angered me more than what I've seen as uneven development. And I've looked at certain parts of this city and been unhappy that they haven't been developed. And I'm so excited. So thank you, staff. I mean, this is great. This is great news for me. I'm happy to hear it. I want 3 votes back. I wish I can go back now and change my vote on at least 3 things I said no about. I should have known, didn't know. But I think, I've always worried whether we do a disservice by sometimes saying no because there's no infrastructure and we don't let development come because we kind of perpetuate the fact that there's no development. So I worry about that, though. I don't want to get too far ahead of the infrastructure. But I'm very pleased to hear this and excited about that. So hats off to staff. I'm excited to hear more.
Thank you. David, I know you had your hand up again as well.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to make another comment on is that I would agree with what Tom was saying about, Tom and Nate and everybody was saying about, if we had known a little bit more about sort of what was being developed here as far as a small area plan, I think it's real helpful to kind of knit this together because it's almost like we're looking at each individual application and we're almost making the same comments for each one as we voted no on some of these different developments. And what I've seen kind of going on with the area around me there on Leesville and Olive Branch, there's a lot of clear cutting and a lot of residential development being built, and our concern is just, do we want it to be a sprawl in this area, or do we have a more intentional plan? And there are comments that have been made, that I've made commonly, is transportation, linkage, this type of things, as well as concerns about, where the traffic's going to go, what people, is it going to be more automobile dependent, or is there other things that we can do? And if we do have this small area plan in place, then we could see how each one fits in. And that could also help guide developers towards working together, rather than saying, well, it'll be another developer that'll take care of this part, or this road change, or this frontage change, or this sidewalk. It seems like it's coming together kind of piecemeal. And I think this is a good way to kind of bring it together, as well as raise issues that may not be within our power to do, like roads. It's interesting, Scott's slide on Andrews Church, that's now, there's development on both sides. That road, that was a 2-lane highway. There's Del Webb has already been built there. And then on the other side, that farm was sold, and it's now a large residential development. So it's interesting how that's going to change overnight. And the sooner we get something like this, the better. I would say 6 months, even if we have something to share, that could be good stuff for what's going on here, because there's a lot of changes going on that even if we wait a year, there's going to be a whole bunch of more development there.
Thanks, David.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Aaron?
I was just going to say, I would have still voted no on those ones in this area that I voted no on, I would expect. I mean, I think this is a good idea, and but at the time we voted, this wasn't in place, and even now it's not currently in place and improved. So I would likely still vote no until there is something that makes the development in this area feel much less like just clear-cut townhome residential with no linkage to any commercial, no walkability, no transit. We're still operating in a world where this isn't the case. This small scale plan is not active. So I just want to put that out there, that my vote definitely would not have changed.
Thanks. Austin?
That's not to discount the work going into this at all. I'm just saying the facts on the ground are still the same as they were when we voted on those. Right now, they're still the same. So, but I appreciate that this is happening.
Yeah, I would agree with Aaron's comments there. And also just wanted to echo everyone else's comments about how pleased I am to see this. As we've continued to see more and more cases, I've continued to feel concerned about the environmental impacts in this area. And I'm pleased to see that that's one of the major priorities being addressed in the small area plan. I look forward to seeing what comes out of it and what we can do to, kind of walk this balance of developing the area, but doing it in a way that doesn't continue to exacerbate the continual climate deterioration we've seen. And I appreciate the staff's work on it. Look forward to seeing how it turns out. Thanks.
Can I chime in for a second? I don't know if our chair has frozen. Can y'all hear me at least?
We can hear you, Sarah. You should just go ahead and speak.
I'm going to go for it then. I wanted to just share a little bit that one of the things, we have spent a little bit of time as I was putting together the presentation for council on this, doing a little research, and it's the roadway situation is one where, because we're limited, we can make developers do improvements in their frontage, but what we really need is a knit together network that functions. What has happened on the Raleigh side of Leesville Road is a similar set of facts. Lots of neighborhoods were built. And eventually, what Raleigh has done a fair bit differently than Durham, and that I am pushing Durham to step its toes into, is they have done a lot of transportation bonds. And they upgraded Leesville Road from in their jurisdiction to a fabulously modernized, bike ped friendly roadway. And the issue in Durham is not so much capacity, it's modernization. It doesn't, these roadways, you know, when you look at, I've compared this area roughly to the area 98 north between like Mineral Springs and Cheek. And there's a ton of developments that have happened in that geographic area, which is roughly similar in size to this area. And all those roads, neither Mineral Springs, nor Fletcher's Chapel, nor Chandler, nor Clayton, none of those roads have been widened or modernized other than the little bits that development has been made to do as part of there. And it has not been a traffic transportation problem. So what our transportation department has been telling us, and I agree with, is it's a modernization issue. And that's really the issue. And the best way to get at that may be for us to do something we've never done before, like what Raleigh has been doing for the past 30 years. So that will be a big shift, but that may be one of the things that comes out of this. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we're exploring things that haven't really been Durham's norm.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So you probably noticed I got bumped a couple times, so I don't know who asked the question or who has the floor. So if someone currently has the floor, it's still yours. All right, I think we're good then. Scott and Sarah, I did have one other question for you, and this is echoing what I think a lot of my fellow commissioners have said. I mean, I thought the presentation was really well done. The staff clearly put a ton of work into it. It led to a lot of really interesting and important questions with the council members. And it was frustrating for me personally to see it after all of these votes. And that's not a critique of the staff, but is the capacity there to do things like this again once we're done with this one? But before, I mean, are we able to forecast a little bit where this might happen next so that we could be doing this before we're then dealing with this being swamped by all these proposals? So, if so, I would hope that we as the Planning Commission, along with the governing bodies, might be a part of that conversation on the front end as opposed to being on the back end. So kind of a two-part question, but interested in getting your thoughts and feedback on how this might work more proactively with our engagement next time.
I'll start and then I'll let Scott chime in to correct or change anything I might say that he may want to. We have planned as part of the comp plan to do a series of these in areas that are either currently experiencing pressures where we feel like we don't have an adequate plan in place to address it, or in areas where we expect that pressure will start to build more and more. We do have at least, I think, one other area that I don't think has started really, and it started a little bit, but not in earnest yet, that we'll be looking at. And hopefully we'll be identifying, if there are others. But yeah, that's the plan, is to do this kind of deep dive, if you will, at areas like that, and hopefully catch them before we start to get, 3,000 units pending in the pipeline.
That's great. And it's impressive because I know the staff is really stretched right now. And I do hope that the staff will bring those thoughts to us at the very beginning and to be able to get guidance or feedback as appropriate.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Sarah said. Everything she said was absolutely correct. Is that what we did here in general is what we should do, is plan out the infrastructure for an entire area rather than doing it piecemeal by development, which is what we did with the sewer system. What the lesson we've learned as an organization is that we need to coordinate better on the front end so that we're not providing you and the council this information after a whole lot of things have happened. And so that's, as Sarah was saying, that's what we want to find the next Searles areas in the comp plan and make sure that we plan those and all the services and infrastructure on the front end rather than the back end.
I ordered all my staff crystal balls, but they're a little bit delayed on Amazon. I think I've told some of you that. So as soon as we get those, we'll be rolling.
I would just add that I'm personally hoping that some of the solutions that come out of the Searles area small area planning project will also be applicable in other parts of the suburban tier or whatever the post-suburban tier turns into after the comprehensive plan. So that's a major hope of mine.
Yeah, we have the same hope, Commissioner Baker.
I think a lot of it actually boils down to, I think my earlier comments at the beginning of the meeting about outdated suburban regulations, right? And, suburbia is a reality. We're going to have suburban neighborhoods. The entire county can't be wall to wall, highly urbanized. That's not appropriate. But how do we design and allow suburban neighborhoods to be built that are the best balance of everything, knowing that, of course, they're going to be car dominated, but how do we not forego some of the other aspects like connectivity, walkability, where we link them up with other services, so people don't have to go a long distance to have their daily needs met, et cetera. And if that isn't possible,
and design.
Yeah, exactly. What do these things look like? I will tell you, one of my pet peeves is our tree coverage standards, that someone can like clear cut and then say, oh, we're saving the swath at the back of the development. That sucks, y'all. I'm just going to tell you right now, that is really, really bad. And so those are the things that we're going to be looking to address. And Commissioner Baker, I agree with you. Then those things should be applicable kind of across the board wherever suburban developments happen.
Especially at these densities, quite frankly. If we're building something at 3-4 units an acre, why do we have to clear cut and mass grade? I know it's easy, but it just takes forever for things to recover. Anyway, enough of that. Sorry.
Absolutely. I don't see anyone else looking to make a question or a comment, so we'll move to the next item, but this is great. I'm excited. Appreciate the staff's time on this and looking forward to seeing what might be next. We have 2 items left. The first, Grace, I think we may have you kick us off. We just wanted to provide a little time for any feedback or questions about the meeting procedures. And I'll just note that we do have rules of procedure. We can change some of those. And so especially now that we've been doing this remote meeting for a while, and we may still be doing this for a little while longer, we thought we'd have a little bit of a conversation. Plus we do have a bunch of new members that have come on board. So Grace, I'll let you kick us off and then Armir and I can chime in as appropriate.
So this time is reserved mainly to just get feedback from any of you that may have feedback. If you don't have any feedback about things you think need to change or you would like for us to discuss for change tonight or this evening, you could always email those to the chair and the vice chair. But if there's anything in particular you want to talk about with the way the virtual meetings have been operating, or concerns or suggestions, or if you're happy, but we were just opening up this time to hear back from you on that.
All right, Nate.
I would like to change the rules of procedure so that we can make a different motion, so that we just say move to vote or motion to vote. That's one thing I would like to explore. I'm also just interested in, since staff is going to be sort of looking at new ways of providing information in staff reports. And this is something that I've brought up a few times before, having a little bit more information about distance to things, in particular with regard to, residential developments and distance to the grocery store, distance to the closest park, distance to the closest school, those kinds of things. So those are just a couple of comments.
Great. Jessley?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that something I emailed Grace and Brian and Armir about separately was that I would find it helpful to have a sense of how council is voting on our recommendations after we have our votes. you know, have a general sense that they often approve things that we have voted down. It would be useful to me to get that feedback, so we have a sense of how our votes are being received. Since a lot of the times when we do vote no, part of the goal is to, you know, communicate a message of some kind, and if that message isn't being accepted or received well, then I think it'd be helpful to have sort of a standing agenda item where we can have a regular update on that information, since for, you know, it can take quite a bit of time and work to sort of go through the public materials and piece it all together to find out what happened on each case.
Right. So I had responded to your email, and Commissioner Lanford, and there's several different ways we can disseminate that information. We used to do a report that honestly was a little bit time consuming, and I don't even know, it offered a lot of information, but we also, something else we can do that I've been reminded of, we do a summary every morning, or the morning after each of our city council meetings. And what we could do is just make sure the planning commission gets a copy of that. It's really just the way the council voted versus it's not going to go into the details of why they voted. It's a summary that we send out to the department that basically says, these were the items that were voted on and this was the vote. So we could provide that easily. That's really all you need.
That would be huge.
That'd be awesome.
That's just by email?
Ooh, too many people.
Sorry, that's just by email?
Yeah, it's just an email is all it is.
I would think that would be really helpful, because then I can go back and remember what the cases were. I just don't have the capacity to remember names of every case and what we did on them. So
right. So
go back and work myself on my own time. If you just send the email, would be awesome.
Right. So the information that Commissioner Lanford is asking for is how the council votes. Are you asking for how they vote, or how the commission votes, the planning commission?
I mean, it would be really nice if we could know how we voted and how they voted, but I was really just echoing what Jesselie asked for, which know what council is doing with our votes.
Okay. Yeah.
The cases that we voted on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's just a simple thing by email, like nothing that would hopefully take you.
No, we're already doing it. So we just will
that'd be great.
do the same email.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it's something you're already doing and all you have to do is to send us an email, because I think it would be helpful too, because I'm frequently approached by citizens who somehow expect me to know everything, and I frequently know nothing, as all members of staff know.
Yeah, it's very simple. It's straightforward, and of course, if you had any questions, you can let us know. But we'll start trying that and see how it goes. I've actually got the one that I sent out Tuesday morning after this past Monday night, and I'll just forward that one this week, and let's see if that works for now, and we'll go with that.
Great, thank you, David.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that would be real helpful. It gives a good idea, because I know there's items we voted for and it's been turned down, and vice versa. And so it would be good to see, how are they listening to us, what our comments are, and if there's something where, they reverse something that we voted up or the other way around. I can always go to the video and listen to the video and see, what was the discussion before they took the vote.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Often these things change when they come through us and go to the governing body, and we have to do some of that legwork. This at least tells us the vote happened, and then we can go from there. And I like that it doesn't create more work for the staff, so that seems really good. Other questions or feedback just on?
Can I circle back to Commissioner Baker? I wanted to clarify something just to make sure I understood the statement about the voting. Is it are you concerned about the votes and the motions have to be in the affirmative? Is that your concern? Okay. We can look into that. I will say that we've been advised, all of our boards and commissions do that, and the city council does that as well. The legal team has advised us the way to make our motions. So I don't foresee that changing. I just wanted to share that with you, that's pretty much standard operating procedure for the entire city.
I wanted to address that too. I think it's very important to keep that approach so that you don't have a double negative vote and people leave not understanding what we've done. I mean, that's the purpose for it. But I think Nate is also trying to get is that we have a tendency to vote up or down, when in fact it is entirely possible within our current rules to frame motions in the conditional, saying that we are against this. I mean, we're for this only if these things are met. I mean, and we have done that. It is possible to add meat to a motion and still keep it in the affirmative and still comply with the affirmative motions rule. And so, I mean, it's standard in all legislative formats to do that. It's essentially Robert's rules. But it doesn't mean that all votes just have to be simple up or down. We can say, but only if. And if you can't do it, and if it can't include these things, then we're against it. It can be more complex to cast motions. Sometimes it's very hard to do it on the fly, though. And I suppose, I mean, years and years ago, back before most of you were born, back when we had a planning and zoning commission, it was not unusual for that body to hear the cases 1 month and vote on them the following month. Now, I'm not advocating that, but it allowed people time to think about it. And then we went into a period where they heard all the cases, and then at the end of the meeting voted on all the cases. I think that was awkward, and it just made people who were interested in the outcome of cases stay late into the night. But there are options in the way we cast motions, and we have used those options. We don't do it very much, and it's probably because of the difficulty of crafting those kinds of motions on the fly.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention 2 other things. And Grace, make sure I have this right. I don't think we need to decide on these now. I just think it's worth us thinking through. Number 1, we don't have to meet at 5:30. And so I think I liked the 5:30 meeting when we were meeting in person. And I think I'm okay with it now too. If you had asked me in the summer when we were meeting nonstop, I would have maybe wanted to move it up a little earlier. But that's one thing we can think about. And then the second, which we often sort of improvise on as a group anyway, is the rules of the public hearing, the 10 minutes per side. We can change that. So that's something else that I think we may just want to think about collectively before. Again, I don't think we want to do anything tonight, but those are ones that, especially as we keep meeting remotely, we might decide to change those at some point. So Grace and Sarah, do I have that correct?
Yeah, if I could just encourage you all to really change your practice on the time allotment, and just whoever comes to speak, don't do it by side. Just give everyone an equal chance to speak. That's how the city council does it. It's how board of commissioners does it. It just, I think, simplifies things for folks. We often get folks wondering, what's the deal with the time? And folks, I think if there's some way for you all to share that, in general, your standard maybe 2 to 3 minutes per person or something like that, because sometimes people plan in advance. And I know that it can be tricky when there's a lot of people and you have to truncate the time down to accommodate them. But we have had instances where people prepared thinking they would have a certain amount of time and then had very little. And so any guidance that we can put out there, from you all to the public on that, that makes it predictable, I think would be helpful. But I would really encourage you to just do it a per person basis.
And I agree completely.
I'd like to follow up on that. A couple of months ago, Chair Busby and I were talking about this, and I did some research, and I shared with him some of the things I found, and it was similar to almost the same of what Sarah is saying. And everybody does it a little different, but the thing that we were doing that's very confusing for some is that if you divide it by sides, then there really isn't equal time. It really doesn't work out that way. So to say that everyone gets 2 or 3 minutes is different. Now, if there's presentations for each side and we need a lot of extra time for each side gets a presentation, and maybe they get more time for those, but everybody else gets the same amount of speaking time, we can look into that. But we did do some research, and I'll be happy to share that with you later. But I agree with what Sarah said, because people get really confused about the whole timing and what to expect when they come to the meeting.
Okay. Aaron, you've been frantically waving. What would you like to say?
I would like to say that I really appreciate efficiency, especially when these meetings last for God knows way too long. When we're on Zoom and I'm sitting at my desk since like 8:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, like that's too much. So I actually like the side thing a lot. I don't think that anybody should not be given the opportunities to speak if their side takes much more than, even if it's hours after 10 minutes. I'm not saying that anybody should be not afforded the opportunity to speak. However, I think having an allocation of time by side encourages people to work together and who is actually speaking for the side, because a lot of times people sign up to speak and then they allocate their time to whoever is actually speaking for them. So 2 to 3 minutes a person is actually a lot of time, especially given the number of people that speak. So I'm kind of terrified by that perspective or potential, to be perfectly honest. I'm not saying people shouldn't be afforded the opportunity to say what they need to, but I mean, that just seems a little daunting. I also, there's no way I can meet any earlier. That would be nice, but as someone with a job that I'm stopping work early to do this at 5:30, I can't do it any earlier.
Yeah, I agree with Aaron that we should not meet earlier. The point of meeting when we meet is so that the public has access to our business, because it's their business. And that's why I like the idea that it's a public hearing. And while efficiency is great, to me, I want to make sure that a public hearing is only meaningful if people have an opportunity to come and say what they have to say and to make their points. And so the equal time per side, in my opinion, is not actually equal. And I like the idea that everybody knows coming into it how much time they're going to have, and that they should have at least enough time to make a cogent, pertinent point or two about the case and what it means to them. The point of our existence is to receive, filter, and pass along informed advice to the council and to be the door holders for the community. This is tough stuff. And I talk to neighborhood groups and ordinary citizens who are not developers all the time, and they feel defeated before they start because it's so daunting to figure out the process and the procedures. There has to be somewhere in the middle of it, a friendly place where they can come and say what they have to say. And I realize that some of you work and spend a whole work day at your computer and then in a commission meeting. That is a lot. That is hard. But my convenience is a secondary consideration to the ability of the community to effectively engage in this process through us.
Yeah, and that's really helpful feedback. I will note that whenever we have a big hearing, we have tended to take the 10-minute rule and quickly move to the 2-minute per person. And the only people who I notice complain are the applicants, because they often have a 8 to 10 minute presentation. So again, I don't think we decide tonight. I personally like the idea of just being able to say to everyone, 2 minutes per person. And if there is some ability for both sides to give a presentation, staff, I'd look to you to help us figure out, is there a way to do that? Or do they literally need to, the applicants sign up 4 people, the community signs up 4 people, and they just tell us the order and we just kind of make it work? But as having run the hearings, I can tell you it's much nicer to just be able to say, it's like, if we had a set of rules that actually worked every time, these 10-minute thing, I don't think works very well.
Let me share what the mayor does has been doing lately that has been working really well. And then I won't belabor the point, but he actually asks the applicant if they have a presentation and how much time they need to make it. And then he gives them that time. And usually people are pretty modest, 5-10 minutes. because the applicant has paid for that opportunity to present their case, essentially. And then after that, they allocate equal time to everybody else. So that's something you all may consider, is to just ask the applicant how many minutes they need. You know, obviously, if an applicant says something really unreasonable, like 15, 20 minutes, you can be like, no. But then after that, treat everyone the same.
I agree. I think we could have a rule that says that the applicant can, and I think they ought to be able to anticipate their time. So we say we can allot a certain amount of time. The rules expect that we can allot a certain amount of time for a presentation by the applicant and even by the opponents if there is an organized presentation. And then let the other people who are there, who are not part of one side or the other that are participating in the presentation, have their 2 minutes each. I think you can craft rules like that and then follow up with a proviso that says that the commission can alter the rules according to circumstances in order to make the public hearing the most effective proceeding it can be.
So Carmen had her hand up. Carmen, I'm sorry, I missed it earlier.
It's okay, Chair Busby. I can definitely appreciate the fact that our meetings do tend to run long. I can say it is refreshing that it is not 12 months out of the year that they run 5, 6, and 7 and 8 hours sometimes. But I mean, I work a 7 to 4, 10,000 steps a day job, and to come home and literally decompress for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then I'm in my recliner actively listening to the public for sometimes 5, 6 hours at a time is very difficult. And I go back to work the next morning at 7 a.m. and kind of start my day all over again. The procedure that I think has worked the most and the best for us when we have large cases is when the chair actively commands the amount of time and monitors the amount of responses and, I guess, participation. Because some people will concede their time and they say, okay, I heed my time, I want to share my minutes or whatever the case may be. But then Chair Busby is very active in saying, you've had your chance to speak. Okay, we're going to move on to the next person, whether it's the presenter or the community. Everybody has a voice, but those are clear-cut boundaries that are established and they're respected, because some people we know will continue to go on, not because they feel like they're not being heard, but because that is their moment. And I think by establishing what the rules are and establishing that the chair has the right to kind of govern the way that people respond and the amount of time when people may appear to be long-winded, that's extremely helpful, because we've had cases that could have easily gone on to 3 and 4 hours. But that time management, that sticking in and that saying, hey, you've had a chance to speak, or if you've spoken more than one time, because he's done it to commissioners. He's cut us short when we want to have an open dialogue, like it's a free conversation that we're having amongst friends. And I can appreciate that. I mean, in the interest of my own time, there are times when I may want to speak and I don't, because I have that freedom to write as many characters as I want to in my comment list. So it doesn't matter a whole lot about what I say during the meeting, because my comments will still be received. Sometimes there are things I just cannot sit on, but I think that management that we afford to how we dictate or how we actually allocate the amount of time we're going to allow any one speaker, because we have certain individuals that are extremely active in the community and they are as passionate about the community as the developers are about their project. And if they had a forum where they could battle it out, then we wouldn't need to be present. We could kind of get a synopsis of whatever they talked about. But because we're responsible for navigating, it is extremely hard when you've got 50 and 60 people signed up to speak at 2 minutes a person. That's 120 minutes. So I'm like, I don't want to not hear from the public, but we have to have a cap. And a lot of the people we hear from They send us 30 and 40 emails before we actually get to the meeting. And then they have a 2-minute presentation. And then they want to ask questions to the developer. The developer gets to respond, and then they say something back to the developer. So I think developing a structure that is both community driven as well as developer input, but is balanced by the commissioners in terms of how we approach it and delegating that responsibility up front, that this is the structure of the meeting. This is the way we're going to go about it. Once you establish that standard, then we get the respect, I guess you could say, in terms of our time that we invest on our own accord, because we're not paying to hear or to be heard. So I think that by having governing rules or governing standards for our meetings so that it doesn't seem as though it's a free-for-all, but people still feel free to speak, I think that that would be helpful.
Great. Thanks, Carmen. So this is useful. What I might recommend, and I'm recognizing it's 6 to 5, so I'm hoping we can do these quarterly from here forward. And I would say, let's not decide today. Why don't we put this on the agenda at the next quarterly meeting, and maybe we'll test a few of these things in the next couple of meetings and see what works. And maybe the staff can help us kind of figure out, like, if we are going to change it, I think we have to update our procedures, right?
Not necessarily. We'll take a look at that and let you know. You can set time limits. It's just whether or not you want to codify those in your procedures or just have a standard, consistent time limit that you're going to use until further notice, so that we can communicate that out to the public. So I'll look into the rules of procedure and I'll give you some summaries of what you can do and what you can't do under the current ones.
Okay.
Sorry for being long-winded, Chair Busby.
Hey, no problem. Do folks want to, I think we have two options. We can run 10 minutes longer and we can do the final item on the agenda that was centering community voices in the land use process. Or we can hold off on that and add that to a regular meeting or our next quarterly retreat. Do folks have a preference? Like, does anyone have to leave right now? Are we going to lose folks?
Yeah, I have to jump off, unfortunately, but I'm happy for you all to continue if that's the group's preference.
We would like to do this sooner than later. So my suggestion would be not to wait for the next quarter. This is one of those things we would like to give you a preview of that you probably need to hear about, especially being that you all said you wanted previews of things. Yeah. So if you can stay on the call a little longer, the ones of you that need to hop off, Alexander can run through this fairly quickly. This is not something that you have to take action on. It's an information item. And the ones of you that need to jump off can watch it on YouTube later. How about that?
That sounds good. Let's
if you don't mind staying on a few more minutes.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Jessie.
All right, well, thanks, y'all. I'll try to keep this short and sweet, but I'm hoping this kind of addresses the things that we heard from both the planning director's new direction, planning commission's interest in seeing things ahead of time or getting a preview, and also the need to litigate at public hearings at planning commission and at city council. We're hoping this new vision and approach helps us move towards that. So Mike Stock was supposed to present with me. He has contributed to this, but he had to go help some kids at 6. So I'm going to try to jump in on his part real quick. So one of the goals of this project that we're working on is to create a more accessible, equitable, and transparent pre-submittal meeting process. We know a lot of the projects, the direction it goes starts at the pre-submittal stage. And so we want that to be more robust. We want it to be more clear to the community, and we want it to be more clear for the applicants. We want a more accessible, equitable, and transparent neighborhood meeting process. The requirement to have them and hold them is a great requirement, but we want to be able to really make that work for the community as well. We want to have community engagement before an application is submitted. We know that by the time things get to the application submittal stage, a lot has already been vetted and fleshed out. And then we want a robust educational element with both the community and applicants where we can focus on educating them on the process at hand. And of course, as the title kind of alludes to, we want to center the community voices throughout the life of a development project and land use process. So I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek of what's coming. And if you see anything you don't like or you love or you want to add to, feel free to send the chair, vice chair, and any of the staff comments on what you'd like to see improved. But these are draft ideas. And one of the things that we're talking about is how do we improve this land use process? So we're going to do it in two ways. We're going to center resident voices in the improvement process itself by soliciting ideas from residents and community members and community leaders. These could be people that have been affected by projects before, could be people that already know the process and know how to navigate it and understand what needs to be improved. And then we're going to do some one-on-one interviews with community members, especially ones that either haven't had access and would like it, or really know the process well and could see how it could be improved. So this would be a twofold approach with a quick survey and a one-on-one interview. We want to do the same thing by including applicant voices in the process as well. We realize that they invested time and energy in these projects, and their goal is to make Durham a better place and a stronger community to thrive as well. So we want to send a survey to applicants soliciting process improvement ideas. We want to do some one-on-one interviews about process improvement with applicants and developers. And then we want to get to a point where we're hosting some trainings with them on how to navigate the process in a more transparent and equitable way. Some of the changes that we're hoping to launch tentatively January, February right now, but don't hold me to that. There's a lot of things going on, is to the pre-submittal meetings. So we're talking about having a second pre-submittal meeting, the first one being an engagement conversation. How will they engage the neighborhood, community, and or vested partners around them in this project before they get to a more technical pre-submittal stage? We're looking to require at least 2 neighborhood meetings then prior to application submittal. Again, the first one would be about engagement. The second one would be about a technical review. And then we want to establish a collective determination of how many engagement events are needed, when and what format. We understand that scope matters. It might not be the same for one single family residence versus 650 age targeted townhouses and single family homes in another part of the community. We're also looking to create accountability to the community. So we're looking for a submission of an engagement plan for the entire life cycle of the project from concept to adoption. That's a form that we're currently working on. And we're hoping that this really helps the applicant and the community see a transparent record of what's going on. In addition to that, we want to work to daylight some of the efforts that are being made. There are applicants that worked robustly to engage the community around them. And even with that, sometimes people are missed. And so we want to make sure that record is clear. We're creating a document to capture all those events as well. And then Carl talked about a social pinpoint digital engagement platform. We're hoping in land use at some point, hopefully in the next few months, that we're able to launch it for us as well, and possibly set up a site for each project or a link for each project where people can provide comments and stay engaged throughout the life cycle of it. There are some things that we've also already implemented. Staff is eager to center community voices, and so we've taken some feedback from Planning Commission, City Council, and of course, the equitable engagement effort, and made some changes already. This includes implementation of online scheduling. So we have a process called Acuity that makes it super simple for applicants to schedule their own pre-submittal meetings and send the information electronically. This is really good for people that have participation to barriers with movement and are immobile. We are rolling out a new staff report template that's really taken a new shape and form and really will help make it more readable and make a clear narrative of the project at hand. We'll be attaching neighborhood meeting information to the Planning Commission agenda items. As of July 1st, they are required. And so we have some great, rich resources in terms of recordings of these meetings, minutes of these meetings, and we want to make sure y'all can see what the applicant heard in those meetings. We also rolled out a public interest statement, which I'd be more than happy to talk about maybe at the full Planning Commission meeting. But essentially what that is, it's a list or a matrix of all the different topics that we heard during the comp plan outreach. And it tries to get the applicant to start thinking about some of those in their development project. We know that not every element works for every project, but it does get them to start thinking about what does a sense of belonging mean when you're rezoning? What does it mean to have walkability in your project? Is it appropriate? And so there's a long list of things that they can choose from and choose to reply to. We required those as of July 1st. So once those cases start coming to Planning Commission, you'll start seeing that as an attachment as well. And then during the pre-submittal meetings now that both Danny Culture and I lead, we are focusing on the process with the community, with the applicants, instead of the outcome. So while we know that a strong outcome is important, we want to make sure that we're starting with the strong process and a foundation going forward. And we're having those conversations with applicants and spending some time educating on what that looks like. So that's kind of some of the stuff that we want to give you a sneak peek on. Again, if there's things you like, don't like, you want to send us feedback on, feel free to reach out to Mike, the chair, vice chair, or Grace, and we'd be happy to incorporate these ideas as we begin to roll them out.
Alex, this is great. I think I'll hang on for a few more minutes before we wrap up, just in case commissioners have any feedback right now, but it's very exciting to see these changes. I think this will make our job, I feel like I'm going to be a lot more informed with the changes, and I think the community will be better served. So commissioners, any questions or feedback? Nate?
Yeah, I'll just say that I am pleased that this is being looked at. I think I'm sure it'll be an iterative process where certain things work well and certain things don't work well. I guess with everything, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. But I am happy that this is being looked at. And some of these are kind of innovative things that I don't see very frequently. So I guess as a planner and a code writer, I'm interested in seeing some of these things too. Just a couple quick thoughts, because I know that we're running late. I would like to see more neighborhood planning. I think that's how you engage people earlier than a development is proposed. And once a development is proposed, or once a developer comes to the table, people get reactionary instead of thinking proactively about their own community. And so, you know, how do you get people before the developer comes? So that's one important part that I don't think is part of what you're working on here, Alex. And the other thing that I think would be interesting to take a look at and consider is when is not treating all of these cases the same, and you're probably not, but when a particular case seems to hit a certain level of controversy and is large enough, could that trigger some sort of engagement that's conducted then by some third party, either the city, that the planning department comes in and engages, or a third party, you know, consultant comes in and does a charrette process. Developers can be manipulative and are manipulative in some cases when they have an interest, and so they want to express their point of view. They're not specialists in public engagement, and so, you know, we're sort of relying on their goodwill in a lot of cases. In some cases they do an okay job. In some cases I don't think that they do. And so at what point do we get to a level? Is there a threshold that's being met where we should go the next step and conduct some sort of charrette process? So I think that would be an interesting thing to explore. But like I said, I'm really excited about what you've put out there, and I will be interested to continue to monitor and follow it as you move forward. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments, Commissioner Baker. They're very helpful. One of the things, Alexander did not mention this, but because we have to still sort out, we obviously have a lot of irons in the fire. So one of the things that we are trying to sort out is that other person, or that other, not person, but that other presence in these meetings, so that when you come into these meetings, it's not just the developer giving their sales pitch. It's more of everybody has kind of equal footing. So that is something we're trying to suss out during all this. And it might require some additional resources where we realize that, but that is something we're working on. And I know that's something Sarah feels very strongly about, and she just popped on, so I'll let her finish.
The staff about is to rethink, just because we don't have bandwidth right now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least be the ones maybe hosting the neighborhood meetings. Maybe the main part of the meeting is to help educate the public. What is a rezoning? How does it work? How do you participate? What can developers can and can't do? And less about their sales pitch. And then they get their 10 minutes in the middle of the meeting or at the end to do their sales pitch. but that it's really, we use it as an educational outreach opportunity to build more understanding in the community at large. Because the average person won't, even if with all of our outreach efforts, a lot of people don't get involved until they feel some pressure in their own neighborhood. And so we should capitalize on those opportunities as well.
Great. Tom?
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, I can remember when the whole neighborhood meeting process was introduced into the UDO back in 2005. And we looked at it and we thought for some neighborhoods, this is going to be great. And for some other neighborhoods, this is not going to be so great. It depends upon their level of existing organization and their ability to make collective decisions and all those kinds of things. And I have sat through a lot of these. I have been in meetings where the developers were required to have neighborhood meetings, had no idea what they were supposed to do, and they didn't actually have a very strong understanding of what the code was going to require, especially if they were new to the project, new to the process or to the area, and did not bring their planning professional with them. So I think it's very important to create a process where we don't expect the developer to be the chairman of the neighborhood's meeting. And so I'm really interested in the idea of a neighborhood meeting that is on neutral territory and is being essentially hosted by, I don't want to say refereed, but hosted by a party that is not the developer, because no matter what we do, we cannot in this process equalize the skill sets of the people participating in the meeting and the distrust that naturally flows from that. You've got the people who come in with their professionals, and then the neighborhood who has, the one thing they're sure about is that they don't understand what's going on. It doesn't produce really good results except for in the rarest of circumstances. So if we can fix that, I think this will be fantastic. I am worried about how much staff energy this could suck up. But I do think that maybe some application of staff energy in certain cases at the front end may save a lot of pain and trouble at the back end. And there is a way to know what's coming. If you sign up for the development notice emails that we get, and I don't know whether you all have signed up for that, but I get them. And we get notice of the neighborhood meetings. And I don't go to most of them, but I do go to a bunch. And sometimes I'm invited by the developer or even the neighborhood. They're eye-opening. And you quickly get a feel for who's good at it and who's not. I will say a person whom we see regularly is Jamie Schwedler, and she's clearly advocating for her client, but she runs a straight neighborhood meeting. There are other people in the process who we see all the time who, in my opinion, are way more into sales pitch and actually sometimes I think do themselves harm because their sales pitch is so sales pitchy, it becomes a little used car-y. So to even this out and to make this process more predictable for the participants from meeting to meeting to meeting, and I think has got great virtue, and I'm really thrilled. And I hope it works, and I hope we keep flexible and our knees bent so that we can quickly change when change is required. Because if a year from now, I won't be on the planning commission, but if a year from now if we have improved this process, in my opinion, we will have done a lot. Because the one thing's for sure, if you ask the community to come to a countywide meeting with different colored Post-it notes, you'll get some participants. But if you have a neighborhood meeting about the 20-acre development going in next door, everybody turns out. And this is the place to engage people in a way that's really serious and where we can establish a degree of trust that sometimes I worry that we should have but don't have. So wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm excited to see, I know it's additional work that the staff, I assume, then writes up the summary and puts it in our packet, but it is always amazing when you hear the applicant and the community talk about the neighborhood meeting. You barely know they were in the same room. So it'll be really useful, I think, to have that. So kudos to the staff. You're taking on a lot of stuff. And I think we all appreciate it. And I think our community is going to benefit from all of this work. Any other feedback for tonight? All right. Well,
It's been a great meeting. Thank you all. Thank you, staff, for all the initiatives that you're pulling together. I know, like, from time to time I bust your chops. That's just who I am. But I think I really like the way we're headed, and I think we can do great things as a community together. Makes me wish I could be on the Planning Commission longer, although I'm tired.
Well, one last thing.
Just thank them as a Christmas miracle. Go ahead, Nate.
I was just going to say that I'm hoping that some of these reforms, changes that are happening, gain some attention from the elected officials and show them the power and the importance of planning, and that this narrative that we keep hearing about staff being under-resourced and overworked, that we can chip away at that and get the resources to planning that they need from the elected officials. And so I think part of that is demonstrating to them exactly what can be accomplished through this work. So I'm hopeful there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks again, staff, and thanks for everyone for sticking around a little longer than anticipated. Armir and I will work with the staff, and again, hopefully we can do this again in February, but we'll see you in December at our regular meeting.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Before we go, what kind of agenda have we got for our next case meeting?
I think we have four cases and maybe one information item.
And 3 of them are on Olive Branch Road?
Maybe one.
Okay.
Do we
sure, yeah.
Do we need a motion to excuse Commissioner Lowe?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right. Tom,
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. Roll call vote, please.
Hang on. Commissioner Amendolia?
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Chair Busby?
Yes.
Commissioner Cameron?
Yes.
Commissioner Durkin?
Yes, with the note that another thing that would be great for efficiency is if we could somehow do away with roll call vote, the need for a roll call vote for this kind of thing. I know that it was said no, we have the pandemic.
State law.
Things have changed.
State law, when we're in virtual, we have to do roll call for all votes.
Okay.
Sorry, I know. No one dislikes it any more than I do.
I'm sure.
So Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Kenchin?
Yes.
And Commissioner Lamfrey has left the meeting. Commissioner Lowe is absent. Commissioner McIver?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
And Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I got it.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Everyone.
Bye.